I kissed my son's forehead one last time and walked out of the ICU, believing nothing could save him anymore. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as I stumbled through the sterile corridor, my legs barely carrying me after weeks of sleepless vigil. But then, near the nurse's station, I overheard a conversation that stopped me cold. Two young nurses were discussing a patient from a small town, someone who looked exactly like my dying son. Those words changed everything, setting me on a path that would unearth a 38-year secret and lead to the kind of revenge I never thought myself capable of. My name is Margaret Hale, and I spent 42 years of my life healing others as a registered nurse at Greenville General. Now, at 65, I found myself on the other side of that equation, helplessly watching my only son slip away in the very halls where I once brought comfort to so many families. Daniel lay motionless in bed 7 of the ICU, his skin taking on that waxy pallor I'd seen too many times before. The machines surrounding him beeped their mechanical rhythm, ventilator whooshing, heart monitor tracing its jagged green line, IV pumps clicking as they delivered their precious cargo drop by drop. Each sound had become a countdown clock in my mind, marking time until the inevitable. 3 weeks. That's how long I'd been living in this purgatory of fluorescent lights and antiseptic smell. 3 weeks since Daniel collapsed at his construction site, his body finally succumbing to the rare blood disorder we'd been fighting for 2 years. Aplastic anemia, they called it. His bone marrow had simply given up producing blood cells, leaving him vulnerable to every infection, every minor injury becoming potentially fatal. I'd watched his 6'2" frame shrink before my eyes. My strong boy, who used to carry lumber on his shoulders like it weighed nothing, now looked fragile enough to break with a gentle touch. At 38, he should have been in the prime of his life. Instead, he was dying, and there wasn't a damn thing I could do about it. The wooden chair beside his bed had molded itself to my body over these endless days and nights. I'd memorized every crack in the ceiling tiles, every water stain, every imperfection in the pale green walls. The cafeteria coffee had long since lost any taste, just hot liquid to keep me going. Sometimes the younger nurses would bring me sandwiches, remembering when I was the one forcing food on worried families. No compatible donors. Doctor, Morrison had said yesterday, his voice gentle but final. We'd tested everyone, distant cousins, family friends, even put out desperate pleas on social media. Daniel's blood type wasn't particularly rare, but finding a bone marrow match was like winning a lottery you couldn't buy tickets for. The National Marrow Registry had come up empty. Time was running out. I held Daniel's hand, careful not to disturb the IV line taped to his wrist. His fingers were cold despite the warm blankets I'd tucked around him. When he was little, those hands would reach for mine whenever he was scared, during thunderstorms, before his first day of school, at his father's funeral 10 years ago. Now they lay limp and unresponsive. The night shift had just changed, bringing in fresh faces trying to hide their pity behind professional smiles. I knew that look. I'd worn it myself countless times. They'd already started speaking in hushed tones around me, the way medical staff do when hope has left the building. My eyes burned from exhaustion and unshed tears. Every breath felt like work. The weight of losing him pressed down on my chest until I thought my ribs might crack. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. Parents shouldn't outlive their children. I'd brought him into this world in this very hospital, held him through every fever, taught him to tie his shoes and ride a bike. I was supposed to see him get married, have children of his own, grow old. Instead, I was planning his funeral in my head during the dark hours before dawn. The hallway felt like a different world after the suffocating closeness of the ICU. I leaned against the wall, trying to remember how to breathe without the weight of impending loss crushing my lungs. My legs shook. When had I last eaten a real meal? The vending machine hummed nearby, but the thought of food made my stomach turn. 2 young nurses stood by the medication cart, probably thinking they were far enough away for privacy. but 42 years in hospitals had taught me that voices carry in these corridors, especially during the quiet hours of the night shift. "I swear to God, Sarah, it was the strangest thing," the blonde one said, checking items off her clipboard. "This patient in Oak Ridge Falls, I was there covering a shift last week. He could be that poor woman's son's twin brother." My body went rigid, every nerve suddenly alert. "You mean Mrs. Hale's boy in 7? Sarah whispered, glancing toward the ICU doors. "Yeah, same face structure, same eyes, even the same little scar above the left eyebrow. If I didn't know better, I'd think they were identical twins. The guy's name is Michael something. Works as a carpenter or furniture maker, I think." The clipboard in my hand clattered to the floor. Both nurses jumped, turning to see me standing there, probably looking like I'd seen a ghost. Maybe I had. "Mrs. Hale, I'm so sorry. We didn't mean," the blonde started, but I was already moving past them, my mind racing. Twins. The word echoed in my skull like a bell tolling. I stumbled back to Daniel's room and sank into my chair, staring at his face with new eyes, that scar above his eyebrow. He'd gotten it falling off his bike when he was 7. How could a stranger have the exact same mark? My hands trembled as I pulled out my phone and searched for Oak Ridge Falls, a small town, 2 hours and 15 minutes north, population barely 3,000, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, where a stranger who looked like my Daniel would definitely be noticed. But it was impossible. I would know if I'd had twins, wouldn't I? The memory hit me like a physical blow. The delivery room, 38 years ago. The pain medication had made everything fuzzy, but I remembered Dr. Briggs's face when he'd said something about complications. There had been so much blood, so much shouting, and then, hadn't he said something about twins? I'd been so out of it, overwhelmed by the emergency C-section. When I woke up properly, they'd placed Daniel in my arms and told me I was lucky to have one healthy baby. They said the other hadn't made it. Said it happened sometimes with twins, one thriving while the other. I'd been too grateful for Daniel, too overwhelmed by new motherhood to question it. My husband Paul had been so happy to have a son. We'd grieved briefly for the baby that might have been, then moved forward with our lives. But what if they'd lied? My nursing experience kicked in, and with it came a cold, analytical clarity. Hospitals made mistakes. Documents got falsified. Babies got switched or stolen or sold. I'd heard the stories, dismissed them as urban legends or rare tragedies that happened to other people in other places. What if it had happened to me? I looked at Daniel's still form, then at my phone showing the map to Oak Ridge Falls. If there was even the slightest chance, if this Michael could be a match. Hope was a dangerous thing. I'd learned that watching patient after patient in my career, hope could break you worse than despair. But as I sat there in the pre-dawn darkness, listening to the machines keeping my son alive, I felt it kindle in my chest anyway. A stranger in a small town with my son's face, it was probably nothing, probably just exhaustion and grief playing tricks on my mind. But what if it wasn't? I left the hospital at 5:45 a.m., just as the first hints of dawn painted the sky purple. My hands shook as I gripped the steering wheel of my old Honda, Daniel's latest photo tucked safely in my purse. I'd told the ICU nurses I needed to go home for fresh clothes, that I'd be back by noon. The lie tasted bitter on my tongue. The interstate stretched before me, empty except for a few early morning truckers. I drove north, leaving Greenville behind as the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the Tennessee hills. Every mile took me further from my dying son, and the guilt gnawed at my stomach. What kind of mother leaves her child's bedside to chase a desperate fantasy? But I couldn't shake the nurse's words. Identical. Same scar. It was impossible, and yet... The landscape changed as I drove. City giving way to farmland, then dense forest. My GPS led me through winding mountain roads where cell service flickered in and out. Twice I pulled over, my hands trembling too badly to drive safely. Both times I nearly turned back. Both times I thought of Daniel's pale face and kept going. Oak Ridge Falls appeared suddenly after a sharp bend, a cluster of old buildings nestled in a valley, looking like something from a postcard. The main street held a diner, a hardware store, a small grocery, and not much else. The kind of place where strangers stood out like sore thumbs. I parked outside Murphy's General Store, my legs stiff from the drive. The bell above the door chimed as I entered, and the elderly man behind the counter looked up from his newspaper. "Help you, ma'am?" My throat felt like sandpaper. I pulled out Daniel's photo with trembling fingers. "I'm looking for someone, a man who looks like this. Someone said he lives around here. Michael." The change in his expression was immediate. His eyes widened, darting between the photo and my face. "Well, I'll be damned. You related to Michael Turner?" Turner, I had a name. "Where can I find him?" My voice came out stronger than I felt. "Lives out on Deer Creek Road, about 3 miles east. Big wooden house with the workshop attached. Can't miss it. He makes furniture. Real beautiful stuff." The old man studied me with curious eyes. Known him since he was a boy. Never mentioned having family elsewhere, though his daddy passed 5 years back. I thanked him and stumbled back to my car, my mind racing. Michael Turner, a furniture maker, living just 3 miles away. The road to his house wound through thick forest, gravel crunching under my tires. I passed 2 driveways before I saw it. A craftsman-style home with warm wooden siding and a large workshop attached. A pickup truck sat in the drive. Smoke drifted from the chimney. I sat in my car for 10 minutes. Paralyzed. What would I say? "Hello? I think you might be my stolen son?" He'd think I was insane. Maybe I was. Finally, I forced myself out and up the porch steps. My knock sounded too loud in the morning quiet. Footsteps approached, the door opened, and I was looking at my son. Not Daniel. The face was weathered differently, the hair shorter, the clothes those of a craftsman rather than a construction worker. But the eyes were identical. Mediterranean blue, just like his father's had been. The nose, the jaw, the way he tilted his head slightly when confused. All Daniel. And there, above his left eyebrow, was a small white scar. "Can I help you?" His voice was deeper than Daniel's, rougher. I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. 38 years of lies crumbled around me as I stared at the son I'd been told was dead, standing healthy and whole, while his twin lay dying 2 hours away. "Ma'am, are you all right?" I gripped the porch rail to keep from falling. "My name is Margaret Hale," I whispered, "and I think you might be my son." Michael Turner stared at me for a long moment, then stepped aside. "You'd better come in." His living room smelled of wood shavings and coffee. Handcrafted furniture filled the space, a rocking chair with intricate carved details, a coffee table made from a single slab of walnut, bookshelves that seemed to flow organically from the walls. This was the work of an artist, someone who understood wood the way Daniel understood steel and concrete. "Coffee?" he asked, gesturing to a worn leather chair. "You look like you could use some." I nodded, not trusting my voice. While he disappeared into the kitchen, I studied the photographs on the mantel. An older couple, his parents, presumably, Michael at various ages, no siblings, no family resemblance to the people who'd raised him. He returned with 2 mugs, settling into the chair across from me. Up close, the resemblance was even more uncanny, the way he wrapped his large hands around the mug, the slight furrow between his brows when he concentrated, even the way he sat, leaning slightly forward, ready to spring into action. "You said you think I'm your son." His voice was carefully neutral. "I need you to understand. My parents were good people. Dad passed 5 years ago. Mom when I was 23. They raised me right." "I'm sure they did." My voice cracked. "But were you adopted?" Something flickered in his eyes. He set down his mug with deliberate care. "How did you know that?" My heart hammered against my ribs, because 38 years ago, I gave birth to twin boys. They told me one didn't survive, but I think they lied. I pulled out Daniel's photo with trembling hands. This is my son Daniel. He's dying in a hospital in Greenville. He needs a bone marrow transplant, and we can't find a match." Michael took the photo, and I watched the color drain from his face. His hand went unconsciously to the scar above his eyebrow. Jesus Christ. "That scar fell off a ladder when I was 8. Dad was teaching me to use his tools." His voice was barely a whisper. This is impossible. Your parents never told you where you came from?" He stood abruptly, pacing to the window. "Dad told me something before he died. I thought it was the morphine talking. He said a man came to them when they couldn't have children. Said he had a baby that needed a home, that the mother was young and couldn't keep both twins. Cash transaction, no questions asked." My blood turned to ice. A man? Not an adoption agency? That's what I thought was strange. Dad said the man was well-dressed, professional, claimed to be a doctor helping arrange private adoptions. They were desperate for a child, and I was perfect, healthy, beautiful, he said. They paid him $10,000 cash and never saw him again. "Do you remember the doctor's name?" Michael turned from the window. "Briggs. Dad said his name was Dr. Howard Briggs." The room spun. I gripped the chair arms to keep from falling. Dr. Briggs. My obstetrician, the man who'd delivered my babies, who'd held my hand and told me how sorry he was that one didn't make it. "That was my doctor," I whispered. "He delivered you and Daniel." Michael sank back into his chair, running his hands through his hair, a gesture so perfectly Daniel that my chest ached. "So you're saying this doctor stole me? Sold me?" "I don't know. Maybe. All I know is that you're here, alive, and your brother is dying." Tears burned my eyes. "I'm not trying to disrupt your life or dishonor the parents who raised you, but if you're really Daniel's twin, you might be the only person who can save him." We sat in silence for several minutes. I could see him processing, weighing, deciding. Finally, he looked up, and in his eyes I saw my late husband's determination. "Tell me about my brother," he said quietly, "and then let's go get tested. If I can save him, I will. After that, we figure out why Dr. Briggs did this to us." Relief flooded through me so intensely I nearly sobbed, but beneath it, something darker was taking root. Doctor. Howard Briggs had stolen my son. He'd sold him like merchandise. He'd let me grieve for a baby who wasn't dead. And somehow, he was going to pay for it. The test results came back in 3 days. Perfect match. 10 out of 10 HLA markers aligned. When Dr. Morrison delivered the news, I collapsed in the hospital corridor, sobbing with relief while Michael held me up with arms that were strong, like Daniel's should have been. The transplant was scheduled immediately. I watched my 2 sons meet for the first time in the pre-op room, saw them study each other with wonder and recognition. They didn't embrace. How could they? They were strangers who shared a face. But when Michael gripped Daniel's shoulder and said, "We're going to get through this, brother," something broken inside me began to heal. And something else began to burn. While Michael underwent the harvest procedure and Daniel prepared for the transplant, I had time to think, time to plan, time to dig into the past that Dr. Howard Briggs had tried to bury. The hospital's old employee directory still listed retired staff. I found Briggs easily. He'd left Greenville General 15 years ago, citing personal opportunities in private practice. His forwarding address was in Florida, Sarasota. Of course it was. But I needed more than an address. I needed proof. I started with Janet Williams, a veteran nurse who'd worked labor and delivery back in '87. She was 73 now, living in assisted care, but her memory was sharp as a scalpel. "I remember that night," she said, her weathered hands clutching her teacup. "You had complications, emergency C-section, doctor. Briggs insisted on handling everything himself, wouldn't let me assist with the second baby, said it was stillborn, but what?" I heard crying, 2 distinct cries. When I questioned it, he said I was mistaken, that it was just the first baby, but I delivered hundreds of babies. Margaret, I knew what I heard. My hands clenched into fists. "Why didn't you say anything?" "I did. Filed a report with the nursing supervisor. It vanished. A week later, I was transferred to pediatrics. The message was clear. Keep quiet or lose my job. I had 3 kids to feed. She looked away. Shame etched in every line of her face. I'm sorry. I should have fought harder. I found 2 more nurses from that night. Same story. Concerns raised, then buried. Transfers, threats, silence. The adoption lawyer Michael's parents had mentioned in their papers was long dead, but his secretary wasn't. Donna Fitzgerald, now 81. Living in a Miami retirement community, I drove down while the boys recovered. Told her I was investigating old adoption irregularities. That doctor brought us 5 babies over 2 years, she said, her voice papery thin. Always twins where one didn't make it. Always cash deals with desperate couples. Mr. Lawson thought it was legitimate. Private adoptions were less regulated then. But I knew something was wrong. 5 babies? Maybe more. Those were just the ones that came through our office. She pulled out a yellowed ledger she'd kept. See? All from Greenville General. All delivered by Dr. Briggs. All supposedly had dead twins. The rage built slowly, methodically, like pressure in a steam engine. This wasn't a single crime of opportunity. This was a pattern, a business. I researched Briggs online. He hadn't just retired to Florida. He'd retired wealthy. His medical practice had specialized in fertility solutions before he sold it for millions. Now he lived in a waterfront mansion, served on charity boards, played golf with senators. His wife had died 10 years ago. His own children lived scattered across the country, successful and distant. The Greenville Herald ran periodic features on him. Local doctor gives back and Briggs Foundation funds new hospital wing. He was photographed at galas, smiling that same reassuring smile he'd worn while telling me my baby was dead. In every photo, I saw him differently now. Not the respected physician, but the monster who'd torn my family apart, who'd stolen my child and sold him, who'd built his fortune on the grief of mothers like me. But I also saw opportunity, all those public appearances, all those charity events where press would be present, where his carefully constructed image could be shattered in front of everyone who mattered to him. Daniel was getting stronger every day, Michael's marrow taking hold in his body. The brothers were bonding, sharing stories, rebuilding 38 years of lost time. Watching them together was joy and agony combined, all those missed birthdays, Christmases, scraped knees, and little league games. Dr. Howard Briggs had stolen all of that from them, from me. And I was going to make him pay for every single moment. The Briggs Foundation annual gala was scheduled for March 15th at the Ritz-Carlton in Sarasota. $500 a plate. Proceeds going to pediatric research. The irony wasn't lost on me. A man who'd stolen children funding research to help them. I had 6 weeks to prepare. 6 weeks while Daniel grew stronger, while the color returned to his cheeks and he started taking walks around the hospital corridors. 6 weeks of watching my sons learn each other, sharing tools and techniques. Michael teaching Daniel about wood grain. Daniel showing Michael construction blueprints. I told them nothing of my plans. They had enough to process without adding my vendetta to their burden. The evidence collection consumed my days. I drove back to Miami, convinced Donna Fitzgerald to give me copies of those ledger pages, found 2 of the other mothers whose twins had died, one in Georgia, one in Alabama. Their stories matched mine perfectly. Emergency C-sections. Doctor. Briggs insisting on handling the second baby alone. Cash adoptions arranged within days. Sarah Chen from Albany still had the death certificate. So did I. I compared them side by side in my motel room, noting the similarities. Same vague cause of death, complications during delivery, same signature, same lies. I hired a private investigator with my retirement savings, a former cop named Marcus Webb who specialized in cold cases. He dug deeper than I could, finding financial records, tracing money trails. Your doctor, Briggs was systematic. Webb told me over coffee 3 weeks into his investigation. Between 1985 and 1990, He reported 12 sets of twins with one stillbirth. That's statistically impossible for one doctor. The adoption fees ranged from $10,000 to $25,000 per baby. Tax-free cash. That's over $100,000, I calculated, my stomach churning. Closer to $200,000. In today's money, nearly $500,000. Seed money for his fertility clinic, which he sold in 2005 for $8 million. The numbers made me dizzy. My son, sold to fund an empire. Webb had more. I found 3 nurses who were transferred or terminated after questioning him. One filed a complaint with the medical board in 1988. It was dismissed without investigation. Briggs was golf buddies with the board chairman. I spent long nights organizing everything into a comprehensive package. Medical records, financial documents, witness statements, photographs. I had copies made, one for the police, one for the media, one for the medical board. But first, I wanted Briggs to know exactly who was destroying him. The gala ticket was easy to obtain. A donation to the foundation, a false name, a new dress that made me look like any other wealthy retiree supporting a good cause. I practiced what I would say, how I would stand, where I would position myself for maximum impact. Daniel was discharged 2 days before the event. He and Michael had rented a house together in Greenville, planning to merge their skills into a custom building and furniture business. Watching them sketch plans at the kitchen table, finishing each other's sentences. I saw the life they should have had. "You okay, Mom?" Daniel asked the night before I left for Florida. "You seem distracted." "Just processing everything," I told him, which wasn't a lie. Michael looked up from his notebook. "We've been thinking, maybe we should contact this doctor, Briggs, get answers about why he did it." "Maybe," I said carefully, "but he's an old man now. Confronting him might not give you the closure you want." They exchanged glances. That twin communication I was still getting used to. "It's not about closure," Michael said. "It's about justice. What he did was kidnapping, human trafficking." "We've been talking to a lawyer," Daniel added. "The statute of limitations is complicated, but—" "Let me handle it," I interrupted too sharply. They both stared at me. "I mean, you two focus on healing, on building your business. I'll look into the legal options." I left early the next morning while they were still asleep. My garment bag hanging in the back seat, my evidence boxes locked in the trunk. The drive to Sarasota felt both endless and too quick. By 8 p.m., I stood in the Ritz-Carlton bathroom, applying lipstick with steady hands. My reflection looked older than my 65 years, but my eyes burned with purpose. In my clutch bag, folded precisely, were the photographs of my sons and the first page of evidence, just enough to start the avalanche. Doctor. Howard Briggs wouldn't see me coming. He'd be surrounded by admirers, basking in their approval, counting their donations. He'd never suspect that a woman he'd wronged 38 years ago was about to destroy everything he'd built on the foundation of stolen children. I smiled at my reflection, cold and sharp. It was time. The ballroom sparkled with crystal chandeliers and the shimmer of evening gowns. I moved through the crowd like a ghost, champagne flute untouched in my hand, watching, waiting. Doctor. Howard Briggs held court near the stage, his silver hair perfectly styled, his tuxedo impeccable. At 81, he still commanded attention, still wielded that practiced charm that had once convinced me my baby was dead. I recognized several reporters from the society pages, their photographers capturing the glamorous crowd. Perfect. The local NBC affiliate had sent a camera crew to cover the charity aspect. Even better. The program showed Briggs would speak at 9:30 p.m., right after the silent auction results. I positioned myself strategically, close enough to the stage for impact, but near enough to the press section to ensure they'd capture everything. "Ladies and gentlemen," the foundation president announced at 9:25, "please welcome our founder and chairman, Emeritus, Dr. Howard Briggs." Applause thundered through the ballroom. Briggs climbed the steps with the confidence of a man who'd never faced consequences. He gripped the podium, beaming at his audience. "Thank you all for your generous support," he began. his voice still strong. "When I started this foundation 15 years ago, I dreamed of giving back to the community that gave me so much." I let him speak for 5 minutes, let him bask in their admiration one last time. Then I stood. "Dr. Briggs," I called out, my voice cutting through his practiced speech, "I have a question about your commitment to children." He paused, squinting into the lights. "I'm sorry, we'll have Q&A after—" "My name is Margaret Hale." I stepped into the aisle where the cameras could see me clearly. 38 years ago, you delivered my twin sons at Greenville General. You told me one died. You lied. The ballroom rustled with confusion. Briggs gripped the podium tighter, his smile faltering. "Madam, I think you're confused." Michael Turner of Oak Ridge Falls. I pulled out the photographs, holding them high. Born April 3, 1987. Sold to Frank and Linda Turner for $10,000 cash. His twin brother Daniel nearly died last month because he couldn't find a bone marrow donor. Because you told me his brother was dead. Security guards started moving toward me, but the press was faster. Cameras swung in my direction. Reporters pushing forward. "This is ridiculous," Briggs sputtered. "This woman is clearly disturbed." Janet Williams, L&D nurse, heard both babies cry. I pulled out the documents, my voice growing stronger. "Donna Fitzgerald has records of 5 illegal adoptions you arranged. Sarah Chen from Albany. You sold her son, too. I have the evidence right here." "Someone remove this woman!" But I was already at the press section, handing copies to the nearest reporter. Financial records, witness statements, a pattern of stealing twins and selling them. He built his fortune on kidnapped children. The ballroom erupted. Guests gasped and murmured. Cameras flashed like lightning. Briggs was shouting something about lawyers and defamation, but his face had gone gray, sweat beading on his forehead. "You want to know what kind of man honors children?" I turned to face the crowd, tears streaming down my face now, but my voice steady. "A man who steals them from their mothers? Who sells them like commodities? Who builds his wealth on the grief of women who spent 38 years mourning babies who weren't dead?" "Lies!" Briggs roared into the microphone. "Security!" "Then let's call the police," I shot back. "Let's have them investigate. Unless you'd prefer to explain why 12 sets of twins in 5 years all had one stillbirth under your care. Why nurses who questioned you were transferred. Why adoption lawyers have records of cash payments." The NBC reporter was at my elbow now, microphone extended. Behind her, I could see other media closing in. But my eyes were on Briggs, watching him crumble in real time. You can't prove." He was backing away from the podium. "I have the DNA tests," I said, delivering the killing blow. "My sons, both of them, are alive and tested. Identical twins. One raised by me, one sold by you. How many others? Dr. Briggs, how many mothers did you rob?" He tried to run then, stumbling off the stage toward the exit. But Miami-Dade police were already entering the ballroom. Marcus Webb had made sure they'd be nearby, ready to respond to a disturbance at the gala. "Dr. Howard Briggs," the lead detective announced, her voice carrying across the stunned crowd. "We need you to come with us for questioning regarding allegations of kidnapping and human trafficking." The handcuffs clicked onto his wrists with a sound like justice. Cameras captured every second, his shock, his protests, the way he looked back at me with recognition finally dawning in his eyes. "You," he breathed. "Me," I confirmed. "The mother you thought would never find out. Guess you were wrong." As they led him away, the ballroom exploded into chaos. Reporters surrounded me, shouting questions. Foundation board members huddled in horrified clusters. The carefully orchestrated evening had become a crime scene. I stood in the center of it all, calm at last, 38 years of lies, ending in 5 minutes of truth. My phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. "Mom, what did you do? It's all over the news already." I smiled, typing back. "What I had to do? Come home to your brother. Both of you." The flashbulbs were still firing as the police car pulled away with Briggs in the back seat. I stood on the Ritz-Carlton steps, watching the taillights disappear into the Florida night around me. Reporters clamored for more details, but I'd said everything that needed saying. The evidence would speak for itself now. By morning, the story had exploded across every major news outlet. Prominent doctor arrested in decades-old baby selling scheme. My phone rang nonstop. Producers, journalists, even a documentary filmmaker. I turned them all down. This wasn't about fame or vindication. It was about justice, pure and simple. The investigation moved swiftly. With the evidence I'd compiled and Webb's research, prosecutors built an airtight case. 5 more mothers came forward, their stories matching ours perfectly. Briggs tried to cut a deal, then tried to claim dementia, then finally broke down and confessed. He'd needed money to fund his clinic. He said the babies were going to good homes. He'd convinced himself he was helping everyone. The judge didn't buy it. Neither did the jury. I sat in the courtroom between my sons the day the verdict came down. Guilty on all counts. Kidnapping, human trafficking, fraud, conspiracy. At his age, even a reduced sentence meant Briggs would die in prison. As they led him away in shackles, he looked back at us one last time. I saw no remorse in his eyes, only the bitter rage of a man who'd finally been caught. "How do you feel?" Daniel asked as we walked out into the sunshine. "Tired," I admitted, "but complete." Michael took my other arm. "Thank you for never giving up, for finding me." "Thank both of you," I said, "for finding each other." We drove back to Tennessee together. 3 hours of comfortable silence and occasional laughter. The furniture business was thriving. Turned out people loved the story of twin brothers reunited, creating beautiful things together. They'd already hired 2 apprentices and had orders backed up through Christmas. I retired from nursing officially, spending my days in their workshop, watching them work. Sometimes I'd catch them moving in perfect synchronization, reaching for the same tool at the same moment, and my heart would ache for all the years stolen from us. But then one of them would crack a joke, the other would laugh, and I'd remember that we had now. We had tomorrow. We had each other. The other mothers got their reunions too. Sarah Chen flew in from Albany to meet her son, now a school principal in Texas. The others connected through DNA testing sites. Tears and wonder mixing as families reformed across decades of separation. Briggs's fortune was liquidated in civil suits. The money went to the families he'd destroyed and to legitimate children's charities. The foundation bearing his name dissolved overnight. His legacy crumbled as thoroughly as his reputation. 6 months later, I stood in my son's workshop, watching them put the finishing touches on a dining table commissioned by a client in Nashville. They worked in harmony, Michael carving intricate details while Daniel joined the massive pieces. 2 halves of a whole, finally united. "Mom," Daniel called out, "stop lurking and come help us with the stain." I smiled, walking into the sawdust-scented space that had become our sanctuary. "I'm retired, remember?" "Never too retired to help your boys," Michael countered, tossing me a pair of work gloves. As I joined them at the workbench, I thought about Briggs one last time. He was serving his sentence in a federal prison in Atlanta, forgotten by the society that had once celebrated him. No reporters visited, no friends wrote. He'd built his life on stolen children, and now that life was gone. But we remained, stronger for the breaking, closer for the separation, complete in our imperfect reconstruction. The table gleamed under our hands, warm maple catching the afternoon light. Tomorrow, a family would gather around it, sharing meals and memories, creating the kind of moments Briggs had tried to steal from us. Justice had been served, cold and final in that courtroom. But this was something better. This was love reclaimed, family restored, life continuing despite those who would destroy it. I looked at my sons, both of them now, and knew that sometimes the best revenge isn't just watching your enemy fall. Sometimes it's rising anyway, together. The end. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect. If this story touched you, Please subscribe to the channel and let me know your thoughts. Your feedback means everything, and I can't wait to hear what you think about Margaret's journey and the justice she fought so hard to achieve.